Kia ora, g'day, and welcome to a supplementary video on or for episode 80 of the History of Aotearoa New Zealand podcast. In that episode, we talk about the game Torere, which is a pre-European or potentially post-European, as we do discuss in the episode, Māori board game. It's probably the most famous Māori board game that is still around and is also potentially commercially available, although I could never find it. And in that episode, we do talk about how to play the game, but you would be forgiven for not really understanding the rules in an audio format. If you're anything like me, being able to see the board and being able to see the pieces and all that sort of stuff makes it a lot easier to understand kind of how the game is played and what is going on. So in this video, we're going to talk about and actually play the game. And to that end, because of course it is a two-player game, and that would be really boring and kind of silly of me to do it by myself, I have my partner, Lily, with me.
Hello.
So Lily, you've never played the game at all.
No, I watched you practice on the computer for about 30 seconds 10 minutes ago, but didn't realize that's what you were doing, so I absorbed nothing.
Yes, yeah. So later on in this video, she was watching me again, as we mentioned in the episode. The Torere is actually, for some reason, in the game Mountain Blade 2 Bannerlord. I do not know why. It is somehow associated with the French faction, which is also very silly, but who knows. So yeah, so later on in the episode, or in this video, I'll show you where that is in the game, just because we can. But yeah, so you don't know how to play this game, Lily, whatsoever. This is all pretty much brand new to you. So you've quite kindly drawn the circle.
Oh, yeah, with my absolutely perfect, flawless rendition. Yes.
Yeah, which is it's kind of an important thing about the game, is that it's very easy to play. As you can see, we have used our D&D playmat that we use to do miniatures on for D&D, and Lily's just drawn basically the game board, and our pieces are just off-brand Lego. It's not Lego. I feel like we should stress
not sponsored.
That. Not sponsored.
Not sponsored by off-brand Lego from the warehouse.
Yes. No. Yeah, it was from the warehouse. That's right. So we're basically just using some sort of differently colored pieces, because that's what we had available. But of course, you could use pretty much anything that you want. If you wanted to be like Māori who were playing this hundreds and hundreds of years ago, you can just draw it on the ground and use differently colored stones, is what they were doing. So the way that the game works, or the object of the game, is to stop your opponent from being able to make a legal move. So there's pretty much only two conditions to make a legal move, which is you can move your guy into the center, and to do that, your piece has to be adjacent to an opponent's piece.
Okay. And
then your piece to move into the free square has to be adjacent to the free space. That's pretty much the only two rules. And so there's always only one space that's ever free in the game. So sometimes you might just be forced to make certain moves. Actually, I could not make that move. It'd have to be that. So there you go. So that's how the game works. And the idea is to stop, again, your opponent from making a legal move. So there's only a few different sort of game states that kind of occurs in. And it's actually like a lot harder than you would think.
I feel like the simplicity is what makes it hard.
Yeah. So me playing it, you saw me 10 minutes ago, it took me ages to try and purposefully get beaten by the AI, because the sort of move that they do is this. Repeatedly.
That's what I was... when I saw you doing that, I was like, that looks insufferable.
Yeah, so it's kind of... The problem with that was the AI is very... it's on the easy difficulty, so it will just choose, like, not necessarily the optimal move, and so it's difficult to break the game, like break the sort of stalemate when I don't really want to make another move except this one, and yeah, so it's kind of interesting. So let's play a game and just see how we get on. so I'm going to be the yellow and black pieces. Lily is going to be the green and blue pieces. So I'll start by doing that.
Okay. So now I'm allowed to do this?
Yeah, and so now the only move I can make is that.
Right. And now I would be allowed to do this?
Correct. And the only move I can do is this.
Right.
The only move you can do is move
that.
is out there. And so you see I can now move any of my pieces into the center because they're all technically adjacent.
And that's all I can do.
Yeah, and then that's all I can do. And so you can kind of see they're relatively straightforward and simple moves. So in... Oh, this might be bad. So people who are really good at this could see 40 moves ahead, which is kind of insane.
I maybe someday could train myself to that point, but I have no desire to work that hard.
Yeah.
This seems like a good time-passing game rather than something I would want to really approach from a scholarly perspective.
Yeah, but there was also a lot of Māori would fleece Europeans because Europeans would see them playing this game and they'd go, "That looks pretty easy. I bet I could win a bit of money out of that and beat them." And that's correct. You've now beaten me. So that's a game state where I can make no legal move. I cannot move into the center because, well, the center's occupied, and I also can't move over to here because you've blocked me from doing that. So you win the game. So that's pretty much how you play Torere, a deceptively kind of simple game that, you know, if you're just sitting around and you're just moving pieces, can actually be quite complicated.
It seems like the goal that I was working towards on just a hunch was that you want to group your opponent's pieces together so that they sort of get stuck amongst themselves.
Correct. So kind of the two or a couple of the sort of things that you want to happen is you want your opponent's pieces to be grouped together on the outside and you want to occupy the middle because...
But then the risk, of course, is you can't make your opponent's pieces be grouped together without you yourself grouping your pieces together.
Exactly. So there's a bit of complexity there in trying to maneuver your pieces so that you're cornering your opponent, but because of the way that the game is designed, you
have
also
to corner yourself.
Kind of corner yourself. So that's pretty much how you play Torere, a deceptively simple game that Māori took a lot of money from Europeans for.
Good for them.
Good for them. They were also, the other thing I didn't mention in the episode was that the governor, George Grey, the second or third governor, I can't remember, of New Zealand, was offered to be played by a Māori rangatira. He offered George Grey, "Hey, we'll play a game of Torere. The winner gets the entire country." George Grey declined. So that's the sort of...
He said, "That sounds too fair. I'm going to leave now."
Yeah. So
I declined to participate.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so that's pretty much how you play Torere. And we'll now cut over to me showing you how to play or where to play it if you're, for some reason, own the game M&B2 Bannerlord. Alrighty, here we are in the game M&B2 Bannerlord, and I've just basically quickly created a new character and basically just dumped him in the world so that we can basically just see the game as quickly as possible. So, as you can see, if we scroll all the way out, this is the fictional world of Calradia, basically made up of, as we mentioned in the main episode, the sort of empire, the Roman sort of empire in the middle, which is split into three factions because they're currently in a civil war, with all the kind of other inspired factions on the outside. So we're chiefly concerned with these guys, the red ones over here, which is the Vlandians, the French-inspired faction. So if we go into one of their towns, so if we go into Sargot, and then we go to Tavern District, and then visit Tavern, and all of the different taverns throughout the world, you'll find a different game depending on the culture that the town is. So if we head over here to these couple of blokes, one of them is called a game host. They're usually really easy to spot because they'll usually have some sort of, game in front of them. And as you can see from what we had before with me and my partner and what we got here, it's basically the same thing. The setup is virtually exactly the same. So if we sit down and we have a chat to the game host, you can change the difficulty. As I said before, the easy is kind of interesting because you get stuck in a loop a few times. But if we go normal, we'll see if it changes it to be any better. Let's go, looks good, let's play. I'll be white. That doesn't really have any functional difference other than who goes first. White just goes first, I guess, because chess rules. And then, yeah, you can see that it pretty much looks exactly the same, and it works exactly the same too. So if I try to select the center ones, I can't do that because that violates the, I don't have one of those conditions of to move into the center, you have to be next to one of the opponent's pieces. And so it tells you basically that with that little kind of, I don't know if it's an ink splatter or a blood splatter, but basically that little sort of mark means, yes, you can make that move. So we'll make the same move that I did with Lily and see, we just play the game, how we get on. And you can see it, there's not much else to say about it other than, it runs exactly like you might expect. And so there are some quests around this where sometimes you can have to try and beat someone to try and get, someone's bet on a game to get their land and has bet their land on it, so you can try and beat this guy to get him back. And that sort of thing. Otherwise, you can just bet money on the hardest difficulty in this. And so, as I said, it is quite simple, but also fairly difficult to try and corner your opponent into that sort of space that you want. Now you see, this is the mistake that I had before when I was playing Lily, was if I move this guy here, I've lost the game. Because he'll move into that free space and then I won't be able to get there. So if we keep going, make a move that means I won't get cornered. So again, you do need to occupy that middle space to be able to actually win. But it is quite difficult. I don't know why it keeps showing in here saying you cannot make any moves skipping turn, because that's just not true. The game is early access, so maybe that's something that has just not been patched correctly. Maybe that's what it is. But who knows. Oh, that was a wrong move as well. But that's okay, because we had the center. So he can only make one move there as well. And so you can also kind of see how you could get people who could see many moves ahead. The game is all about trying to predict what your opponents will do, but then of course you get into this sort of state where it's all kind of higgledy-piggledy, and you've got to try and try and corner your opponent again. But you've already seen how the game works and what the winning game state is, so I'll leave it there. So yeah, hopefully you have enjoyed this little look at a really old Māori board game that was played potentially prior to the arrival of Europeans. So it's potentially very, very old, possibly hundreds of years old. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this look at something a bit different and a bit interesting.